Hello, hello. I hope you're all having a wonderful day. So, in today's episode, we are going to talk about how I told my therapy clients that I was pregnant. And this is, sort of tricky. I will say that from the minute that I shared on Instagram that I was pregnant, I was getting a lot of DMs from other therapists saying that they're pregnant too. If that's you, congratulations. I'm so excited to be on this journey with you. Or trying to conceive and were nervous about this idea of having to tell their clients that they were pregnant. And so they wanted to know, how was I doing it? What was my plan? What should they be doing? And so I decided to record this podcast episode. I will say before we get into things that my situation, I think, is a little bit different because I am planning to take a pretty extended maternity leave from my one-to-one clinical work. So obviously, you guys know I have this podcast. I do a lot of brand deals. I do a lot of coaching and courses and memberships with other therapists that are a little bit more flexible for my time. I won't say that they're passive income. They definitely all take, a lot of work, but they're not something where I have to have my butt in a chair at a specific point in the day. And so I decided that I wanted to take a break from one-on-one clinical work for a year. So what I'm doing with my clients is that I'm actually terminating with all of them versus letting them know about a maternity leave. So I'm going to start this episode by actually sharing some more generic advice of what I recommend that most therapists who are pregnant do. And then towards the end, I will share what I personally did and how that all went down with my clients. All right, let's get into things. So, the first question is, when should you actually tell your clients that you are pregnant? I think that this varies quite a bit, but at the minimum, I would say after the first trimester, right? Both for your own sanity, it can be a really anxious time just because of the higher rates of miscarriage. And you really don't need that anxiety of what if something goes wrong and I have to give this update to my clients? How are they going to feel? Are they going to be concerned about me? But also, you don't need to give your clients like 6, 7, 8, 9 months notice that you are going out on leave. In fact, that can actually be like kind of damaging to the clinical work because it's just looming over things for so many months. And oftentimes, probably your clients will be in a completely different situation 7, 8, 9 months from now than they are, at this point in time. So definitely, I would say wait until after the first trimester. Typically, I would say that most therapists that I've talked to end up telling their clients between the 12 and 20-week mark. If you are somebody who sees your clients in person, you might have to do that sooner, like on the 12-week side of things, depending on how early you start showing. Or if you're fully virtual, you can probably wait to tell people closer to 20 weeks if that feels good. So really kind of up to you there. I would say at minimum, I would give your clients at least 6 to 8 weeks notice. So that would be well into the third trimester. But in general, I would say most people tell, in the early portions of the second trimester. If you are taking an extended leave, tell your clients earlier, right? You want to give them the time to process. You want to give them the time to end work, to wrap up, to find referrals, all of that. So, I think that's something to consider there, right? Whereas if maybe you're only taking 4 weeks off from seeing clients, you can probably wait a decent amount of time because it's not going to be like a huge disruption to the work. The other thing that I think is really important to consider in terms of like when you tell your clients is sort of therapeutic considerations, right? So if your clients have a history of trauma or a history of abandonment or attachment wounds, or they've had their own experience with infertility or pregnancy loss, you might want to give them more time to process that news with you before you go out on leave, right? And so sharing earlier, and by earlier I still mean, maybe the 12 to 16-week mark, I think really gives your clients more time and space to explore their reactions. And something that I saw with my own caseload is that, some people were pretty happy to have like a one and done conversation about it. And some clients needed repeated conversations over multiple sessions to really integrate the news, to process the end of our relationship. And so depending on the client, you might tell people on your caseload at various points in time. You also want to plan your coverage, right? So depending on the length of leave that you plan on taking, your coverage plan may vary, right? So if you were taking a shorter amount of leave, maybe let's say 4 to 8 weeks, you might just go ahead and pause the work with your clients for a bit and have sort of like emergency coverage in place, right? So maybe if you have a group practice that's an associate at your practice, or it could be another colleague in the community who works with clients similar to you. Maybe it's somebody who you can return the favor for one day when they are pregnant, right? And can just sort of be like an on-call person that you have in your signature in case your clients need it. And that will vary too, depending on like the acuity of your clients. But usually I find if you're just taking 1 or 2 months, most people don't want to actually like restart with a new therapist for that time. They're happy to just sort of pause, and then, you can feel better and they can feel better knowing that if something crazy goes down, they have support that they can reach out to. If you are planning on taking a longer leave, right, I would say, maybe 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months, right? I would definitely have more of an in-depth coverage plan in place, right? So this might be actual like referrals out for people. It might be ending therapy for a bit. It might be even like hiring an associate and recommending that they work with that associate during that time. But it is really important to like have more options, especially if you are somebody who's planning to take a more extended leave. And then the other thing too is like you don't have to have this all figured out. I think it's really good to have options, but your clients also have choice in what they do, right? So if you are somebody who knows, yes, I'm coming back from leave, you don't want to tell your clients like, hey, you have to go see this person for this time or whatever. Just ask them like, I'm planning to take 2 months off. How does that feel? Are you wanting to take a pause from therapy in that time? Would you like me to provide another referral or maybe an emergency point of contact? And just see what they have to say, right? In terms of how to tell them, I suggest being direct. I suggest being warm. And I suggest also being somewhat boundaried with it, right? Um, I had a lot of clients who were like very excited for me, which was really nice. And so I made sure to tell them like at the end of session. So it wasn't like sort of spilling into our work and becoming like the entire focus of the whole session. I do 45-minute sessions sort of on the hour. So I knew I had like a good 15 minutes before I had to get to my next appointment. And, I had clients who were like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Like, they wanted to chat. Do you know if you're having a girl or boy yet? Whatever. And that was totally fine. But it didn't go like much deeper than that, right? And I think that was good in terms of boundaries and clinical boundaries there, I guess. The other thing that's helpful is like really validating that clients might have mixed feelings. And so to make space for that, both in the initial conversation and then also checking in like the weeks to come, right? Especially again, if you're taking a longer leave, your clients are probably going to have a lot of feelings about that. And that's okay. You want to allow space to talk about that. I was often actually like the one to bring up the negative emotions and say, how are you feeling about us ending our work together? And they would say like, oh, it's pretty sad. And like, oh, like tell me about that. Are you annoyed to have to start new with somebody else? Like what fears are coming up for you? And really just like naming that that's okay to feel that, right? Yes, they're very happy for me, and it also has a direct impact on them. And so as their therapist, it's my job to really make space for those feelings. So in terms of how to actually tell your clients this, I'm going to share a little brief script of what I would say sort of at the end of session, right? So I want to share something personal that will affect our work together in the coming months. I'm pregnant. And then I would just sort of pause for a second and say, I'm currently blank weeks along, and my plan is to continue seeing clients until blank date. So really letting them know up front, like where you're at in the pregnancy and when it is that you plan to start your leave. And then I would say what your plan is, right? So I plan to blank. Maybe I plan to take 4 weeks off for maternity leave, or I plan to take off 2 to 3 months for leave, or I plan to take off 6 months for leave, but let them know what that plan is. And then I would say, I know this may bring up a range of thoughts and feelings, and I want to make space for us to talk about that whenever you'd like. And then I would really pause and let them have their reaction, right? So we're telling them up front everything they need to know. How far along are you? When is your leave going to start? And how long do you think that it's going to last, right? And that just really helps to provide a lot of clarity in terms of like next steps, because I think that the biggest hurdle can be this question mark of like not knowing, right? Especially if you work with anxious clients, that can be really uncomfortable. My own therapist went on or is going on maternity leave now. And for me, my biggest thing was she honestly didn't tell me like her initial plan up front. She just shared that she was pregnant. We are pregnant at the same time. And she was like, based off our conversation today, I wanted to share this with you. You know, I'm telling you a little bit earlier than my clients because it didn't feel right for you to tell me and me not to tell you. And she didn't know her plan. And that just caused like some anxiety for me. I was very happy to know and like felt honored that she told me. And that she was able to like share in that process with me. But I definitely had a lot of like uneasiness and question marks, not really knowing what was left and what was like our next step in a time period where I needed some support. Right. And so I do think it's helpful to sort of wait and give your clients like that information when you're telling them. And then, you can see what they say and say, we still have a few months. We can talk about this more as it gets closer, and whether or not you're feeling like you want to pause our work at that time and, see another therapist, have an emergency person on call. Like, we have lots of options there. So I would just, really emphasize that you are here for them. You're here to talk about it. You're here to process. You're here to make it a smooth transition if that's relevant, and just sort of like take it from there. I don't think you're going to get a ton from your clients that first conversation, except for like, excitement and congratulations. But as it gets closer, definitely keep bringing it up, keep checking in with them, see how they're feeling, and really start to like solidify that plan for coverage while you're out. As you actually get closer to taking your leave, you want to be really clear with your clients too on what your reentry plan is, right? Like what your plan is in terms of starting back up. And there's a lot of different ways to do this. There's no right way, but I'm going to share a few common things that I see therapists do. So first off would be ramping back up with like 5 to 10 clients and then slowly adding in more as you are able. So you can start to schedule clients in advance in order to really keep people like locked in. So maybe you are taking your leave and you are starting to go out August 1st. Maybe you have 5 clients scheduled for the week of October 1st. Maybe you have 7 clients scheduled the following week, 10 clients scheduled the next week, right? So you can sort of like stagger it like that if you'd like. You can start with the people who are either most eager to return, the people who have the highest need, the people who were like, no, I don't want a referral. I will only work with you. So you can sort of pick what that looks like and tell people dates accordingly. If you are feeling like, I don't really know exactly how much time I want to take off, I have that flexibility financially, and I want to sort of like take it by ear and see how I feel, I would tell your clients that you are going to take a range of time off, and I would be specific with that range. So I'm going to take 8 to 12 weeks off for maternity leave. I'm not sure exactly what that will look like yet. I'm going to email all of my clients 2 to 4 weeks before I return and see who wants to resume. At that point, I will open up sessions on a first come, first serve basis. And if we need to push the start date back a little bit, we can go ahead and do that too. So that could be a second option. And that's something you can even like automate in your electronic health record and allow clients to self-schedule to really make that transition coming back easier for you. If you know that when you return, you are planning to make significant changes to your private practice, I would let clients know that before going on leave, ideally, if you can, right? So oftentimes I'll see a lot of therapists as they are sort of making this transition into motherhood, decide that they either want to reduce their hours and or with that, they need to raise their fee in order to reduce their hours, right? And so maybe the amount that you have been working previously, doesn't work for you in this new season of life. And that is totally okay. In my opinion, I think that the sooner you can tell people, the better, right? So again, ideally before you go on leave. And if not, definitely we want to tell them at that point when you're offering to schedule that session with them and letting them know that you are returning, right? And it's really simple. You just would say it the same way that you say any other fee increase or rate change or hours change, and say, I wanted to let you know when I return, I am having some changes to my practice. So I'll no longer be doing evening hours, or I'm only going to see clients on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, or my fee is going to be going up to $250. And then just pause and see what they say, right? See if they're like, okay, no problem, or that doesn't work for me, or I have to think about it. But just see what they say and give them that information. Okay, now I want to talk about some specific situations that may sort of deviate outside of the norms that I've laid out so far in this episode. So, one really common question that I got in DMs is, what if I am new to private practice and I need to go on maternity leave? And I definitely think that that can be a little bit of a tricky situation, but sometimes that's just how life works and it's what we need to do. So, my advice would be to stop accepting new clients about 3 to 4 months before your due date. Potentially even earlier if you're somebody who works with clients who need really long-term, really intensive support. But I think 3 to 4 months is like usually pretty okay for most people. And at like 20 weeks, I would definitely start telling new clients on intro calls. So, meaning that if you get a new person coming in, I would let them know basically what you've already told your existing clients at this point. So, yes, I'm happy to work with you, blah, blah. Before we schedule our first session, I did want to let you know I am X weeks pregnant. I'm planning to go out on a 2-month leave in July and August. And then just say, does that work with you? Are you still wanting to move forward? And see what they say. But you really do want to be transparent. You don't want it to feel like a bait and switch. If you've already announced like on social media or something, especially if you have like a public facing professional account, I would definitely tell clients, like your existing clients on your caseload and any potential new clients, from the point that you've shared on social media, right? You don't want people to find out from somebody that's not you, or from you in another place outside of like the clinical room. So that I think is really helpful. And then something else in terms of like not having like a hard and fast rule, like it has to be 3 to 4 months or it has to be 20 weeks or whatever, is just sort of ask yourself, like, can I reasonably offer this new client enough time for us to do meaningful work? Will I have enough time to close or transition well? Do I have the capacity and energy right now to help and to take on a new client, right? If you can answer yes to those questions, like I don't think that there's any harm in doing so, and taking on new people. But if you're like, oh, like this would suck. I feel like I'm only going to be able to do 4 weeks of therapy and then we're going to have to pause for 6 months. Like it's probably not in your or their best interest for you to start working with them. The other specific situation I'm going to touch on is now mine, right? So I am taking a extended maternity leave from clinical work, as I shared. So I basically told my clients, like, I'm not coming back. And that definitely like switched things up from the plan that I've laid out earlier in this episode. So what I basically told people was that I'm planning to take off at least a year from one-on-one therapy work around the time that I'm having my child. And so, unfortunately at this point, like I do need to end our work together. And that was sad, right? Like I shared with them, I was like sad to do that it was felt bittersweet for me. And yeah, it was hard. But I told clients basically at the end of my first trimester. So I gave them, a lot of notice. And these are all clients. I haven't taken on new therapy clients for quite some time. So these are all clients who I've been working with like 3-4 years at this point, which made it harder in a way, right? Because they are people that I think we would have worked together for the rest of their lives if, I had let that happen. And so, I just had to be transparent. I had to share that. And it was received well. Like, I think people were mostly happy for me. I would say 90% of my clients asked for other referrals, and we really worked to like transition in that time. But I was really clear in my boundaries that like I wanted to refer people out, or else I wanted them to take a break from therapy if they felt like ready to do so and to try things on their own. But I didn't want people to be waiting for me or to sort of be in limbo, wondering like when it was that I was going to come back, because I knew minimum I'm taking at least a year from one-on-one therapy work. And it didn't feel right to me to do that, to like sort of keep them in this holding pattern. It didn't feel like it was in their best interest. It would have felt like pressure for me to sort of return. And I just didn't want to do that to them. So I ended up deciding to terminate. And I know I shared a little bit about like my decision making around that choice in the beginning of this episode, but just to go into it a little bit more, I absolutely love my work as a therapist. It's a huge piece of my identity, and it's like work that I get a lot of meaning out of. And it's also like the smallest portion of my business and one of the most time intensive portions of my business. So I usually spend all day Thursday in calls with therapy clients. And it's something I really enjoy, but that's not the vibe I want to have in the first year of my child's life. I really want to be home. I want to be present. I want to, be able to be with him during the day. And I don't want to feel like totally capped at the end of the day because I just saw, 6, 7 client sessions since I see them all on one day. Um, and so for me, I knew that I wanted to end that one-on-one therapy work. I also decided to end my one-on-one business coaching work at this time, right? Which is actually like quite a lucrative revenue stream for me in my business. But really what I had to decide was like, what do I want my business to look like? What do I want my hours to look like? What do I want my responsibility to look like? And those were sort of like the easiest things for me to move, right? They were huge chunks of time in terms of like calls, um, a lot of like mental energy in terms of like how I show up and I'm with clients. And it just felt like the right decision to me. And so I had a lot of fears about like disappointing my therapy clients. I even had fears about like, what are the therapists that I work with going to think if I'm not practicing at this point in time? I already get a lot of questions on my monthly income reports of like, why is your therapy income so low? And it, at the end of the day, I had to decide like, that's okay. People can have judgment. People can decide I'm not the right fit for them if that's what they want. But ultimately, I built my business that way I can live a life that I want to live. And at this point in time, me not having, 7 therapy calls on my calendar every week, and another 6 one-on-one coaching calls feels really good. Like that's really what I'm wanting. And so that's sort of what I landed on and why. And, even if you're somebody who's like, okay, that's not my situation, Kelly, great for you, happy for you. I'm planning on taking a much more limited leave. I'm sure that you can relate to that, right? I think that as therapists, we all care about our clients really deeply. And so we worry a lot about like abandoning our clients, triggering our clients. We feel a lot of guilt over prioritizing our own needs. And that can just be really hard. And so I think it's worth noting. I think it's worth acknowledging that you're not wrong for feeling that way. And also, you are allowed to prioritize yourself. You're allowed to do what feels good to you. You're allowed to make changes to your practice. You're allowed to make changes to your business because at the end of the day, you're a human first and you're a therapist second. We want to do right by our clients. We want to do this in an ethical way. We want to give them lots of notice. We want to do it with compassion and humanness and a heart behind it. But you are allowed to pick you sometimes. Another really common fear that I hear from therapists who are planning to, return to work is that they are worried that their clients will terminate or not come back when they return, that they'll lose business, that they'll lose income. And, at the end of the day, I think that you probably will, and that's okay. If you are taking an extended maternity leave of 2-3 months, some of your clients probably will terminate, right? You will for sure lose income in that time, even if you just take 2 weeks off, right? Which I hope that you're taking more time than that. But no matter what, you are going to lose income and you're going to lose business. And I think that it's about like planning in advance and making that okay, like saving financially for it, making sure your fee is like supportive. So that way, even if you're only working 8 months out of the year this year, you're still able to earn enough to meet your needs, to meet your family's needs. And just sort of accept that that is, part of it. You might have a period of time when you come back that you are sort of rebuilding and having to market yourself more and sort of rebuild that caseload. And that is hard work, but it might also be kind of like a nice transition period for you. Again, kind of not having like so many hours where you are butt in chair doing therapy and can have some work that can be a little bit more flexible as you are sort of working to rebuild your caseload. I do want to share a few tips that I think will increase the likelihood of your clients returning, right? So, first off, if you have a really strong therapeutic alliance with your clients, if you have really strong rapport, most of the time they're going to just want to wait for you, especially if it's a somewhat limited leave. They're not going to want to go out and find another therapist and start over and tell them their whole life story and all of that, right? So, if you have a pretty good relationship with your clients, I wouldn't worry too much about it. I think really being clear in your communication about the timeline and return date really helps people with that decision to stay. And then providing interim support or referrals, I think is really helpful. Reassuring clients that like their care is still a priority, and then staying in touch with minimal updates, right? So I'm not saying like email your clients every week and let them know what's going on with you and your baby, but let them know like, hey, confirmed I have my baby, all is well. I am planning to take those 8 weeks that we talked about. I will reach out to you on X date and let you know, and we can schedule our session. Or if you pre-schedule those sessions, like, I'll see you on X date for, our next session, whatever. But keep them up to date, right? Have them understand that, yes, you are confirming this is still the plan. Some things that you can do that I think will decrease your likelihood that your clients will come back when you return, right? So this is things that I would avoid doing is having ambiguous or last minute leave plans, not communicating at all during leave where clients start to worry about whether or not you are going to come back, taking a really long leave without following up, um, if you are providing like outside referrals, if your clients develop like a really strong rapport with that referral therapist, they might decide to stay with them. And that is totally okay and what's best for the client. So I would not make that wrong. But I think that is just a little bit of a fact of life. And then if clients feel like abandoned by your absence, so the more that you can talk about it, the more you can be compassionate and straightforward and give advance notice, I think is really, really helpful. All right, that is all for today's episode. I hope that this was helpful. It's been so cool to me to see how many pregnant therapists are in this community, and also like how many therapist moms have reached out to me to give me advice, to share their learning so far. I just so appreciate it, and it feels like I'm entering a new world, a new era. I have a new thing to bond over to bond with all of you over, and it's so fun to be part of like this new therapist mom club. So, anyways. Absolutely love that. If you are pregnant, DM me. Let me know how many weeks you are. I am cheering you on this journey. And it's so fun to be able to do it together. All right. Talk to you soon. Bye.